Hello once again, folks. Mark Coleman here for the Riverbend Sports Network, welcoming you to Week 8 of the Gridiron Report, a weekly look at the top stories in Fredericksburg Regional High School football. This week, our guest is a good friend of the RBSN. He is a reporter for the Freelance Star and part of the wonderful and talented crew of FLS Varsity, Mr. Nathan Waters. Nathan, good to see you.
Good to see you too, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you. In addition to local sports, Nathan also covers Virginia Tech athletics, and you can follow Nathan on Twitter. He is at Nathan Waters. You can also keep up with all of the local high school sports scene by logging on to flsvarsity.com or following them on Twitter at FLSVarsity. Well, Nathan, the big story from last week has to be the weather. The rain played a factor in every game. In fact, it caused the rescheduling of some of the games. We had games played on Friday, Saturday, and in fact Monday this past week. Fans that were able to brave the elements certainly were rewarded with some exciting games, though, including our game of the week. 6-0 North Stafford hosting a 3-2 Colonial Forge team. We were expecting a very tight physical game, and we certainly were rewarded with that. Nathan, you were at the game, actually. No pun intended. What were your takeaways from the game?
Yeah, takeaways. That was the story. And North Stafford turned the ball over 5 times. Colonial Forge turned the ball over once, and obviously in a game between two really high caliber teams, defensive oriented teams, you knew it was going to come down to the team that made the fewest mistakes, and that was definitely the case for Colonial Forge.
Forge came away with a 12-0 victory, their third straight shutout. That's a pretty talented defense that they've got there.
Yeah, they're really clicking right now. They've played a really tough schedule to start the year. Some people called it the toughest schedule in Virginia, and they've really kind of been battle tested. And I think that's really showing now. They've got 3 straight shutouts. 2 of them were on the road, which is it's very impressive. Especially Friday's win, that was tough, going to North Stafford and a consistent rainstorm and playing pretty disciplined, pretty fundamental football. And I think right now they're probably clicking in every area, and I think they're probably a really good bet to make a pretty good run there in the playoffs.
Well, the win certainly puts them in good position. They are currently first in their half of the 6A North standings, despite the 3-2 record, 4-2 record now. They're sitting quite pretty. North Stafford, of course, is still in good shape. We currently have them at number 5 in the 5A North, with a big game looming against Massaponax in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and North Stafford's going to be able to earn their stripes there. I mean, they've been tested as well, and you kind of you feel bad because I was talking to Joe Mangano, their coach, earlier in the year, and he was saying that's just the hope of every coach. You hope that you don't have that letdown, that one game during the season where things just aren't going your way, and that was kind of the case for them against Colonial Forge. And that's going to be a really cool game, a really good game. Them against Massaponax, 2 really strong programs there. Former, I guess you call them former Commonwealth District foes. I guess the district's still around. Who knows? But I think both teams are pretty potent on both sides of the ball, and I think it's going to be a really good matchup for them coming up.
Certainly looking forward to that, and certainly North Stafford doesn't have too far to look back in terms of historical relevance. Colonial Forge ended their undefeated season last year as well. North Stafford made a pretty big deep run into the playoffs last season, so certainly not a season-ending loss by any means of the stretch of the imagination for them. Well, another very exciting game that was actually rescheduled to Monday evening saw the King George Foxes with a very exciting fourth quarter comeback to pull off a 21-16 victory over James Monroe. Nathan, the Maury Magic didn't turn out so well for the Yellow Jackets this time.
Yeah, and this was one of those games where you got to take advantage of your offensive opportunities, and I think that's probably what Coach Survey lamented the most after the game, is that they couldn't convert more of their opportunities into touchdowns. And you leave a team like King George in a game towards the end there in the fourth quarter, and like we talked earlier in the year, I thought King George was one of the front runners to win their conference or to compete for one of the top spots there in their conference. And it looks like they're that team. They've stumbled. I think they lost one game this year, but they've played a lot of tough games. They're kind of it's kind of like Virginia Tech in college football. You play good defense, you kind of stick around long enough, and you can win those games. You got a good kicker, and you got an offense that's opportunistic, and that's what they were. They scored with a few seconds left and broke that long losing streak there at Morey, which it's kind of shocking, but at the same time, I think King George is pretty good, and I think they were they earned that win. So it was an exciting game, and I think it's probably the sign of more good things for them this year.
Well, and finally, from last week, we had the Massaponax Panthers handling business, beating Mountain View 32-22. Mountain View was a thorn in Massaponax' side last year, Nathan. They knocked them out of the playoffs, and they've had their number. So this was an important win for Massaponax, and this may set them up quite nicely for the rest of the season.
Yeah, Mountain View was a thorn in their side on Friday night as well, because they went up 14-0 and were threatening there. And Massaponax is a hard team to keep down, and they've got so many weapons on offense. They were able to rally back and win by a comfortable margin there. Massaponax has got North Stafford coming up. I do believe they've got, if I'm not mistaken, Stafford and Brook Point as well. So I'm thinking that North Stafford's probably the one game that they're really thinking about, but it's important for them to kind of focus on this week and not look too far ahead. But I think Massaponax is in a good spot, as well as North Stafford. So as far as Mountain View goes, I think they're a good team. I think they just run into they're kind of like Colonial Forge, and they've had some injuries early in the year they've had to deal with, like Massaponax as well. But they've had a little bit of tough luck, and I think they're a really good team. And I think they could be a team that, after facing these giants, could be a better team for it, and they could be poised for postseason as well.
And that 5A North region certainly has a strong Fredericksburg flavor to it. Massaponax sitting on the top now at 7-0. North Stafford is at number 5, and Mountain View is right there at number 9 with a 3-3 record. Certainly some work to be done, but if there's going to be a deep run in the playoffs between the 6A and the 5A, there's a good chance that one of the Fredericksburg teams or multiple Fredericksburg teams might be there.
Yeah, and they're facing each other, so they're all kind of beating up on each other, and I think they'll all be better for it. To be honest with you, I mean it's a really, really strong district. They still play each other, even though they're not all in the same conference. They still have that Commonwealth District alignment, and they're it's a tough district, and it's been that way for years. And they test each other, they beat up on each other, and then they go to the playoffs, and they it almost happens every year that one of them makes a long run. So you're going to see that here this year again, and it's just a matter of which team is it. There's so many of them that are capable of doing it, and Mountain View could be that team. Massaponax is rolling right now. North Stafford, they had a hiccup, but they're really strong. Colonial Forge is 5-2 after facing that that laundry list of power teams. So you're going to see those teams. You're going to see those teams do well in the playoffs. I'm going to say.
How impressive has this Massaponax team been, though, to try to overcome the adversity that they have had, particularly as it relates to injuries? Javante Lapney with the off-season injury, he certainly appears to be back. He had a big week last week. Vinny Mahota was out. Barnett now missing some time, fortunately not long time from the knee injury, but they just continue to knock it out of the park.
Yeah, I was talking to Eric Ludden after the Riverbend game, and he was talking about the seniors on that team, and I think this is one of those years where the senior leadership has really kind of taken ownership of the program, and they did that in the preseason. And I think these guys are not looking at it and going, okay, we lost a key cog in our machine here. It's okay, who's the next man up? And I think they've all really done a good job of that. And I mean, it was it's almost absurd how many injuries they've had. I mean, I was talking to Ludden in that Riverbend game. Barnett scores his first 3 touches are all touchdowns, then he gets hurt, and it's like, who else is going to go down? And Mahota, who's one of the higher regarded college prospects in the area, he's been out for several weeks, and who knows when he's going to come back. But they've been winning, they've been performing, and that's a sign of a really good team, a team that's got a lot of good chemistry. And I think that's the reason why you're seeing them continue to win, is because they just have a good makeup, and they got good senior leadership.
I agree entirely, and kudos to the Panthers coaching staff. that next man up mantra is certainly one that probably resonates throughout every team in high school football. But to actually put it into place and follow through on it is another story. So they certainly have been up to the task in that regard. Well, Nathan, some big individual performances this week. As always, the Freelance Star named their Player of the Week. Maybe a little bit of a surprise. It was the game actually that you did. A wide receiver, defensive back, and probably most noted for his defensive play, Daniel Izagwu from Colonial Forge, with the Player of the Week.
Yeah, and he was pretty important on both sides of the football. He had 2 fumble recoveries, returned one of them for a touchdown, a long touchdown. Then he had a touchdown reception after another one of those fumbles. He's a really versatile guy. One of those guys who I talked to him on I guess it was Tuesday, and he's like, I was like, which one do you like better? Do you like offense? Do you like defense? He's like, I don't really know. I like it all. So I think he's just a guy who likes to go out there and likes to play, and he's really kind of relishing in playing pretty much every snap. And he had some injuries, some kind of nicks and bruises early in the year. He battled through those, and it seems like he's healthy now. And he recently got a scholarship offer to JMU, so I think some of these other D1 schools might be coming in and might start offering pretty soon. And a really good kid and really good performance on Friday.
Great story there. Congratulations to Daniel on the victory and being named the Player of the Week. Several other players with some impressive stat lines from the past week. Gordon Collins, we've mentioned his name a number of times, running back from Mountain View, 130 yards rushing, 2 rushing touchdowns. He also brought a kickoff back, 81 yards in that big game against Massaponax. Just wasn't quite enough to overcome it, but kickoff return really came at an opportune time, and Massaponax had a tough time putting away that Mountain View team.
Yeah, and he's one of the reasons why teams really have trouble stopping them is because he's so powerful and so physical. And when they get up, which is kind of surprising that once they got up 14-0, it wasn't surprising because Massaponax they got so much skill on offense, but usually they just go to Gordon Collins and just feed him the ball and let him dictate, let the clock run out and kind of move the chains. And he's that kind of guy. He's hard to stop, and he's a playmaker, but he's a bruiser too, and I think that he's a real asset for them on their offense.
A couple of great offensive performances on the other side of that other sideline from that game. Massaponax, A.J. Forbes with 146 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns, as well as Javante Latney, 226 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns for Latney as well. They were getting it done on the ground.
Yeah, it's kind of pick your poison with them when you have an option attack like that relies on the run, but also has the ability, as we saw against Riverbend, to go over top and really make plays in the passing game. It's just what do you want to stop? You're going to try to stop Latney, you're going to try to stop the quarterback Trice, you're going to try to stop Forbes. It's really hard to stop them all, and it's not the first week they've had multiple guys rush for over 100 and score multiple touchdowns. So just hard to stop those guys.
Good to see Latney back. Obviously, well, I'd say obviously as though I know what I'm talking about, but apparently his knee seems to be doing just fine. He'd had limited touches up until now. Some big games though, but 226 yards carrying the ball. I'd say hopefully he is back from that injury.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things too where you might not have heard his name a lot, but he was out on the field and the last several weeks, and it's one of those things where like I said, who gets the ball, and I think his name was called on Friday, and he was the one who carried the load there. And this week it's going to be somebody different. Next week it's going to be somebody different. I think he's I don't think you run for 225 if you're too banged up. I mean, he might still be feeling it a little bit, but I think that's a good sign for them that he can get the job done even if he is kind of feeling sore and not 100%.
Meanwhile, Caroline with a couple of big wins, and Rashard Harris, quarterback. How's this for a quarterback stat line? We've seen some big numbers from the professionals. Rashard Harris, 428 yards passing and 3 touchdowns. One of his main targets, Keyshawn Johnson. How's that for a football name? 176 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns there for Caroline. They were lighting it up.
Yeah, and Rashard Harris is only a sophomore, and I think you kind of saw some of those young mistakes early in the season. I believe he had a few interceptions there in the opener. I think he kind of had to go through a few growing pains before starting to hit his stride. And they won 3 straight games, and he's been a huge part of that. And yeah, that stat line. I mean, I don't think I've ever. I can pretty confidently say I've never seen a high school quarterback throw for 400 yards, and so that's really impressive. 99-yard touchdown. You don't get any better than that. I'm not sure if Keyshawn Johnson was named after the Keyshawn Johnson. I guess he's young enough, I guess, to have been. I don't know, but that'd be an interesting question to ask him. But he scored 2 of those touchdowns. Had a really impressive stat line. So that's a really potent passing offense, and Boxley too. He's a good tailback. So they've got some good offensive weapons there, and they're going to be put to the test against Cortland. But they won 3 in a row, so.
Meanwhile, Eastern View continues to roll. They go to 6-0. They're sitting now at number 3 in the 4A North. Running back Kendrick Kuby with 211 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns. Von Purvis from that North Stafford Colonial Forge game, 158 yards rushing. That almost seems like an off week for Purvis after some of the numbers that he's put up. But, got to keep that in perspective. 158 yards, that's still a workman's job right there. And then a couple of other wide receivers and then a couple of other players from Eastern View putting up big numbers. Jacob Settle, 101 yards receiving and 3 touchdowns. And Josh Stallings with 207 yards passing and 3 touchdowns. So another great week of stat lines for some kids around the Fredericksburg region. So congratulations to them on a great performance. Well, Nathan, the playoff push is well in swing now. A couple of big games coming up this coming week. The one that I'll be doing actually will have North Stafford visiting Riverbend. Riverbend had a bye week last week. North Stafford, of course, with the disappointing loss to Colonial Forge, have a feeling that they're going to have something to prove. What do you think we're going to see from that game?
Yeah, I think that North Stafford's going to be really kind of eager to get out there and kind of show what they're capable of doing after turning the ball over 5 times and losing to Colonial Forge. And that, Riverbend is, they started fast and they had that game against Massaponax, but I think that they're capable of, doing some things against North Stafford and maybe challenge them a little bit. But it's a tough game for Riverbend, and they're really going to have to be on top of their game in all 3 areas in order to have a chance.
Yeah, certainly they are hoping that they have a bigger, they show up better than they did against Massaponax. They're certainly going to have to play an A game and hope that they can force some mistakes on North Stafford's side. But certainly we hope that we have a close game at least. Brook Point will be visiting Mountain View. It's been a disappointing season thus far for Brook Point. It was looking that way last season as well, and they made a late season push to make the playoffs, but they have a long, tough road to hoe if they hope to make the playoffs this season. They close with some really tough games.
Yeah, they've still got Mountain View, they've got North Stafford, they've got Massaponax. That's it's a murderer's row of opponents, especially for a team that is right. They're still right on the cusp there of a playoff spot, and it's going to be a real challenge to them. And they don't have to win them all, I don't think. I mean, if they're that close, I guess they're 2-4 right now. If they're that close to 2-4, a couple wins might get them in. It's going to be tough, though. I mean, Mountain View is they're kind of smarting from their loss on Friday, and they're going to be hyped up for this one. And Massaponax and North Stafford, they're 2 of the top teams in the area. So uphill climb. Not saying they can't do it, but they got their work cut out for them.
Certainly, there's some talent and some pride there, so it wouldn't be terribly surprising, but it certainly would be an upset to see them to pull off some victories there.
Right.
Meanwhile, another big game in the region, Caroline will be visiting Cortland. Playoff implications here. Caroline is fighting. They are on the bubble currently, 15th in the 4A South. The top 16 teams make the playoffs. Meanwhile, Cortland, after their own difficulties early in the season, playing some bigger and larger schools, they're now sitting number 6 in 4A North at 4-2. That should be a good game as well.
Yeah, Cortland's won 4 straight. Caroline's won 3 straight. I think they both got off to slow starts. Cortland's tough at home, and this is a game that both really can't afford to lose at this point. with few games left on the schedule, and it's going to be interesting to see how Cortland's defense responds to that offense that Carolina has, how they line up, what they do to try to stop it. But it should be a pretty fun game. I don't think that's going to be a blowout by any stretch. I think it's going to be a pretty exciting, close game, and it's gonna be big for whoever comes out of that with a win. It's going to be in a pretty good spot there, playoff wise.
Finally, we've got Culpeper visiting Kettle Run, another game with playoff implications. Culpeper also sitting on the bubble. They are 15th in the 3A East at 3-4. Meanwhile, Kettle Run, I think, is number 2. So Culpeper, they're going to have to play their way in, but I think that they've got the potential to do that.
Yeah, they've got the potential. They got to turn things around. I think they've they lost to Liberty on Friday, I believe, or that might have been a Monday game. And I think they've lost 2 of their last 3, so they're going to have to kind of turn things around. I'm not really quite sure what Kettle Run has. I know it's if you're up there in the standings, you got to be pretty good. They probably played some pretty tough teams, so it's going to be a tough challenge for Culpeper, but a very important one. So we'll see how they perform.
Looking forward to seeing the results of those and all the games from this coming weekend. That'll do it for Week 8 of the Gridiron Report. Nathan, it's always great talking football with you. I appreciate your time and enjoy reading your stories. Looking forward to hearing and seeing more of you. Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, Mark, for having me.
Sure. A reminder that you can follow Nathan on Twitter as well as through flsvarsity.com and on Twitter at flsvarsity. You can also follow us. We are Riverbend Sports Network, riverbendsportsnetwork.com. We are on Twitter at RB Sports Network. For the Riverbend Sports Network, this is Mark Coleman. Thanks for watching, everyone.